Hello everyone, I'm Daisy. Welcome to this crochet along. At this point, I think most of us have started the back panel. In the previous videos, we discussed the basic details about this cal, some useful tips and tricks, and how to make a granny square. This video is sort of part 2.2. So one of our cal members had requested a left-handed version. So here it is. Please note that I will only be going through the actual crocheting process in this video. Kindly refer to the previous videos for other details. So let's get to the crochet part without further ado. For the purpose of demonstration for this video, I will be using 4-ply acrylic along with a 3.5 mm hook. So please note that this is not the gauge that I'll be using for the project. So refer to video 1 for details about gauge and yarn and hook. So this video is purely how to make a granny square left-handed version. So let's begin. So I'm going to start with a slip knot. And once I have my slip knot, I'm going to grab my yarn like this. Before we start row 1, we need to set up a ring that will become our center. So to make the ring, I'm going to chain 4 first. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So here I have my very first chain 4. Now to make the ring, I will be inserting my hook into the very first chain and I will slip stitch to form the ring. And while making the slip stitch, I'm going to make sure I hold on to the chain with my other fingers so that I do not lose the center after I do the slip stitch. So here is the center of my ring. Now that we've set up the ring for the center, we're now ready to start row 1. So to begin row 1, let's make a chain 4 first. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now we're ready to make the very first DC cluster into the ring. So yarn over, insert your hook into that ring, and note that while I'm inserting my hook into the ring, you want to make sure that this tail lays above the hook and not below the hook, because when you place it above the hook, you can trap the tail inside your stitches. So yarn over, and I'm making my first DC. So because we held that tail along with the hook, we've now worked over it. So for the rest of row 1, you want to make sure that this tail always remains on top of the hook. So let's make the next DC. So insert your hook. Make sure the tail stays on top of your hook. And here is our second DC. And I'm going to repeat that to finish our very first DC cluster. So here is our very first DC cluster. So now I'm going to chain 2 for the corner and make a second cluster. Insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, and pull through 2 loops. So each DC cluster is made up of 3 DCs like I've mentioned in one of the previous videos. And second DC, and here's the third DC. And chain 2 for the next corner. I'm going to make one more DC cluster into this row. So let's make our third DC cluster. One, two, and three, and chain 2 for the corner again. And now you will notice that we have 3 complete DC clusters, and now we need to make one more DC cluster for this row. Now we will not be making a complete DC cluster, so each DC cluster is a group of 3 DCs. We will only be making 2 DCs into this ring to finish this row. So 1, and 2. So in order to finish this last DC cluster, I'm going to slip stitch into the chain 4 space that we made at the beginning of this row. So yarn over, pull through, and slip stitch. So the chain 4 space that we made at the beginning of the row will form the last DC for this cluster, and it will also form this corner. Let me get this ball of yarn out of the way because my camera is going out of focus. So we've now reached the end of row 1, and we can pull this tail and trim the end. I'm not pulling it close all the way, I'm just tightening it a little bit. And cut that yarn very carefully, taking care not to cut any of your other stitches. We're ready to start row 2. To start row 2, we're going to do the same thing. Chain 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And like we discussed in one of our previous videos, in this project we're going to turn our work after every row. And now that I've turned, I'm going to make my very first DC cluster into this corner. So I have my chain 4, and I'm going to make my first DC cluster into this first corner. 1, 2, and 3. So we finished the first DC cluster for row 2, and I will now make a chain 1 for the side. Into each corner we will be making a DC cluster, chain 2, and a DC cluster. So let's go ahead and do that. 1, 2, chain 2, one, two, and 3, we're gonna chain 1 again for the side, and into this next corner we will be making a DC cluster, chain 2 and a DC cluster. So that's 3 DCs, chain 2, and make another cluster of the 3 DCs, 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to chain 1 again for the side, and into the next corner again we're going to make a DC cluster, chain 2, DC cluster, one, two, three, chain 2, 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to make a chain 1 for the last side, and we've reached the end of this row. So as you can see here, we only have one complete DC cluster in this corner. We want a second DC cluster to finish this corner, but we will not be making 3 DCs, we'll only be making 2 DCs into this space, 1, and 2, in order to finish this DC cluster, I'm going to slip stitch into that chain 4 we made at the beginning of this round. So here I have 2 complete rows now. I'm going to yarn over, fasten off, leaving a tail of approximately at least 4 to 5 inches, and I'm going to pull that tail through and tug on it so that the knot gets tightened nicely. So now that I have reached the end of row 2, I would like to switch colors. So I'm using this contrasting piece of yellow. It's almost like a golden mustard shade. I've completed row 2, and before we join the new color to start row 3, the first thing I'm going to do is turn my work over. Like I mentioned in the previous video, we're going to turn after every single row, and to join the new color, I'm not going to go into the same corner where I have the tail from the old color. I'm going to move over to one of the other corners and pull the new color through this corner. Then I'm going to leave a tail that is approximately 4 to 5 inches and secure this tail with a simple knot. Now that is secure. Sorry. And now I've spoken a little bit more about this in one of the previous videos. So while joining new colors, instead of sewing in the tail in the end, I like to do a technique where I work over the tails as I am doing the stitches. So that's what I'll be demonstrating for you. So the first thing you want to do is get this tail, take it straight across to the side and bring it over to the opposite side. So when you do that, you're forming a loop with that yarn tail. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to repeat that. So I'm going to hold on to this center part here so that the loop does not fall apart. And I'm going to bring the tail over to the opposite end again, so that I now have a little bow shape with my yarn tail. So it's going this side, opposite side a second time. So I've placed my yarn tail like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold all of these strands from the tail together like this, so that while I work into this corner space, I will also be working around all of these tails. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to insert my hook into this corner, all that while making sure I got all these strands together in place, and make a chain 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now that we made the chain 4, you can see that these strands are already trapped into this very first chain 1 that we made here. And we are now ready to make the very first DC cluster into this corner. So let's do that. And again, while making this DC cluster, I want to make sure I work over all of these tails. So let's make the first DC. One and 1. Sorry. Now let's make the second DC. 2. And now in order to complete this cluster, we need to make one more double crochet. But before making that last double crochet, I'm going to bring this loop over this corner. So this loop was lying here. I'm just going to bring it over so that when I insert my hook into this chain space, I'm also going into that loop. I'm going to make that last DC so that we can finish this cluster. So here's this DC. Now we cannot tighten these loops already because this corner is not yet completed. We need to finish this whole row, come back all the way around and make 2 DC into this corner to finish this cluster. So let's go ahead and make the rest of this row. So we just finished the DC cluster. You want to chain 1 because we're on the side, and we have one chain 1 space here, and we will make a cluster into that. One, 2 and 3. So let's make a chain 1 for the side again. And now we have reached this corner. So now this corner has the tail from the previous color. We are also going to do that same looping thingy with this tail so that we work over this tail as well. So I know it's a little hard to see what's happening because it's the same color, but it's how you place the tail is exactly the same. So I'm going to make a loop on one side, and then I'm going to make a loop going back to the opposite side so that I have a little bow shape with my yarn tail. Here it is. And I am going to hold all these tails together in place like this over here. Now this corner is going to be worked a little different from the previous corner in the sense that, so before making the very first DC, you want to bring this loop over so that when you make the first DC, not only are we going into the chain space, we're also going into this loop. Alright, so instead of holding it up like this so that the strand is above the hook, we're going to hold one strand over down like this. So insert the hook and make the very first DC for this cluster. And please note, all this while I've been grabbing all these other strands together. So now that we finished the first DC for that cluster, we can take this loop back on top and yarn over. And now when we're making the second DC, you want to consciously make sure that both these tails are above the hook and you're going directly into that corner. So let's make the second DC in this cluster. So 1 and 2. So now we're in the corner, so I'm going to chain 2 and let's make a second cluster into the same corner. 1 2 and now we're going to make the third DC into this corner for the last DC of this cluster. So before we make that, we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to take this loop and place it in such a way so that it is around this chain space, so that when you insert your hook into this corner, we're also going into the loop. And now let's make this last DC and complete this cluster and this corner. So I'm going to chain 1 because we anyway on the side, and I'm going to pull up this loop so that I can show you how I tighten these tails. So we have completed this corner, so we are ready to tighten this tail completely and trim the end. So identify the end of the tail and gently tug on it. You do not want to pull it too fast. Slowly tug at it. You will notice one of the sides of the loop is getting pulled through. So you want to grab the opposite side. So this was the side that got pulled through. So now I'm going to grab the other side of the loop and pull it. So what that will do is it will tighten the loop on the opposite side. So you're pulling the wrong end or the wrong side if you pull and the tail is getting shorter. So you want to pull and make sure that this loop is getting tightened and pull that tight. And what will happen is it will lock itself around this very first DC. So that's why when we worked this last DC, we went into the loop instead of working around the loop like all these other DCs. So if you accidentally forget to go into that loop, when we are pulling this, the tail will just come through to the opposite side. It will not lock itself in place like this. So now that we've locked this side in place, we're going to grab that tail and pull it through so that we can tighten the other side of the loop. So here again, so when we made the very first DC of this cluster, we went into the loop instead of around all the strands. So that was for the same reason. So when you go into the loop, you can lock it in place like this. So only the first DC of the first cluster and the last DC of the last cluster, you're going to work into the loop, and all of the other stitches you will hold all the strands together and work over them. So now that we have tightened this tail, we are actually ready to trim that tail. And in case you're worried about this color showing up like this, I've already decided that this will be the wrong side of the project. So basically my odd rows will be on the wrong side and my even rows will be on the right side. So that's how I want my project to be, which is why I'm keeping all my tails in front when I work. So let's go ahead and finish this row. So I'll be making it exactly the same way. So the sides, I'm going to go cluster chain 1 cluster chain 1, and in the corners it'll be cluster chain 2 cluster in the same place, chain 1 cluster chain 1 cluster chain 2 cluster in the corner. And I will meet you at the end of this row where I will show you how to finish this corner. So I've reached the end of row 3. So I have my last DC cluster in this side, and I've made a chain 1. Now in this corner we've already made 1 chain 4. In order to finish this corner, I just need to make 2 DC into this corner. Like I mentioned earlier, before we make the very first DC into this corner, we're going to bring this tail over, place it like this, so that when we insert the hook into this corner, we're also going into the loop, because that's what will lock that tail in place. And we're going to do that first DC for this cluster, and now put this tail back over. So first it was like this, now we're going to put it back here, so that when you insert your hook now into the hook, all the strands are on top of your tail, on top of your hook. Now this will be the last DC for this row. And now to finish this row, I'm going to slip stitch into this chain 4 space, and by doing that we've completed this cluster. So the chain 4 space formed 1 DC and the corner. And let me secure this stitch, and now we can tighten this loop just like the other tail. So grab this end, gently tug on it, and make note of which corner is getting pulled through. And now we're going to grab the opposite corner, the other corner, the other strand of the loop, and we're going to pull that through so that this loop on the opposite end is getting closed. And if you've done it right, it should lock in place just like it has here. And now we can pull this tail, tighten it. I know this can look a little complicated, but as you work, it goes very fast. So that's it. My tail is secure. And before I start the next line, the next row, I'm going to turn over and then chain 4 and continue like the other rows. So this is what we're going to do for the rest of the back panel. So I just want you to keep working a square until your square is as wide as you want the back panel to be, as we discussed in one of the previous videos. So do not be worried about the length of the top at this point. Just keep making the back panel into one big granny square until your square is as wide as you want your back panel to be. So keep working on the back panel. Once the group has decided what we want to do for the neck, there will be further instructions on how to do the front panel and how to do the neck shaping for the front panel. So until then, bye.